Good morning, everyone. Thanks for watching this morning. Obviously, a difficult day for all of us and a difficult time for all of us. I think sometimes I wonder if we are. I think sometimes I wonder if we are ever going to get back to the reality that we knew before, and I hope in Yirtzeh Hashem that we will. And I look forward to being together with all of you sitting in the Chalfin room. Each of you struggling with the locks on the door to get in, and hopefully we'll be able to get back to that point. Emir Hashem, that's what I'm looking forward to, and I have a feeling that's what you're looking forward to as well. However, I think we all understand that that for the time being, this is sort of life as we know it, and I think it's important for us to transition from the mentality that, okay, if I hunker down for, for a few days and do this, then next week things will be better, or maybe next week things will be better. That's sort of the perspective of a sprint. I'm going to put my all into it and I'm going to sprint. I'm going to run the race. I'm only going a little distance. I'm going to sprint and I'm going to be fine. But I'm beginning to think, maybe some of you are thinking as well, that this is not such a sprint. But it might be more of a marathon, meaning that we might have a longer time to go like this than we're thinking initially, and we probably need to prepare ourselves, our mindset, to be able to not only survive but to thrive during this time. So one of the ways we do that is by continuing life with as much regularity as we can, and part of that for me is this Thursday morning shir. I wish I could see you all on the screen and speak to you live, but unfortunately this morning I'm not able to do that. However, it's still important for us to learn Torah, and I hope that that's what we'll be able to do together. I have no way of knowing whether or not you watch this video. You can tell me that you did and you didn't, and that's fine. But if you are watching or listening, so I hope that it will help to make your Thursday morning at least a little bit more regular. So we begin with the pasuk this morning. We're up to Perek Chaf Beis pasuk Lamed Hey, and I'll put it up on the screen here. Vayomer Bilam el Balak. Bilam says to Balak, Hine vasi elecha. Behold, I have come to you. Ata now. Hayachol uchal daber meuma. Can I possibly say anything? Hadavar, the thing. Asher yasim Elokim befi. That which God will place in my mouth. Also adaber, that is what I will speak. So we understand that Balak was upset that Bilam didn't come right away. And Bilam is responding to essentially tell Balak why it is that he didn't come right away. It's tempting to translate the pasuk as Hine basi elecha, behold, I have come to you now, and let's forget about what was in the past. But the Sforno gives it a little bit of a different interpretation. The Sforno says, Hine basi elecha, af al pi shehayisi ba elecha, az kidvarcha. If I would have come to you as you requested from me, ma hayisi mo'ilecha, how could I possibly have helped you? And now you know that klum ani ya'achol ledaber kiminhag kol medaber ritzoni. That I'm really not able to say to you, or I'm not able to say about Bnei Yisrael whatever I want, because I am bound, I am restricted by saying only that which Hashem allows me to say. In fact, the commentary of the Tur says something similar here, that Hayachol uchal daber mu'uma, says the Torah, kiratzoncha. Is it possible that I can say anything like you want me to say? I'm not going to be able to say anything like you want me to say. I'm only going to be able to say that which HaKadosh Baruch Hu puts in my mouth. And says the Tur, Bein klala, bein bracha. It might be a klala, it might be a curse to Bnei Yisrael, it might be a bracha to Bnei Yisrael. And says the Tur, if you want, I will say whatever Hashem puts in my mouth, and if you don't want, so then I'm going to turn around and go home. The Or HaChaim points out that there's an emphasis on the word atah. If you look at the trup, we see that the word atah literally stands by itself in this pasuk. So what does it mean atah now? Why specifically now? So says the Or HaChaim that Bilam is sending the message that, listen, not only was I warned before leaving my house that I would only be able to say that which HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells me to say, but on the way, listen, Balak, there was this malach, and he was standing there, and he was going to kill me, and he warned me again only to say that which Hashem will allow me to say. So, in effect, Bilam is highlighting to Balak, Atah, now, on top of everything, on top of these two warnings, specifically now, that's the only thing I can do. Maybe if I had not had a warning before I left, maybe if the malach had not met me on the road, I'd be able to do more. But now, given those two things that have happened, this is the best I can do, and that is only to say what HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants me to say. If that works for you, fine, and if not, sei gesund, I'm leaving, I'm going back. The Or HaChaim additionally points out that there's something we can learn from this double expression of hayachol uchal. Obviously, as we would normally translate a repetition, hayachol uchal means, am I certainly able, am I surely able to do this? The repetition of the word is considered to be an emphasis. But here, the Or HaChaim explains it a little bit differently. The Or HaChaim says hayachol uchal is really referring to two things. Hayachol, part one, uchal, part two. What is that referring to? Says the Or HaChaim that Bilam is acknowledging to Balak that there were two steps here. The first step was the azhara, the warning that he got from HaKadosh Baruch Hu before he left. And the second was what happened in his exchange with the Malach, at which point Bilam realized that he literally is not within his own ability here. He's not in his own reshus, so to speak. He doesn't have shlita. He doesn't have the ability to control what he wants to do, and he can only do that which Hashem wants him to do, only that which Hashem allows him to do. Says the Or HaChaim that the fact that Bilam mentions to Balak these two things, hayachol uchal, says the Or HaChaim that this demonstrates the real rishus, the real evil that was part of Bilam, because Bilam is effectively saying to Balak, listen, I had an azhara, I was warned, and then I was told, I had an azhara, I was warned, and then it was made clear to me that I don't have any ratzon here, I don't have any will. As if to say, understands the Or HaChaim, that if all I had was the azhara, if all I had was the warning from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and I still had my ratzon, I still was able to do what I wanted to do, so I would have violated that warning, I would have transgressed against what HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted me, and I would have cursed them. However, here I can't, because hayachol uchal. Says the Or HaChaim, from the fact that Bilam hints to Balak that, you know what, if I had my own ratzon, I would have done this, despite the fact that HaKadosh Baruch Hu warned me not to. That demonstrates really what a rasha Bilam was. The Netziv raises an interesting point, and the Netziv focuses on the use of the word in the pasuk describing Hashem as Elokim. What is he saying? Hayachol uchal daber mu'uma. Can I say anything other than hadabar asher yasim Elokim b'fi oso adaber? In effect, says the Netziv, I'm going to focus on the Elokim component of God's persona, if you will. Elokim is Midas Hadin. I'm going to invoke the Midas Hadin on Bnei Yisrael, and I will call upon the Elokim. I will call upon this Midas Hadin to curse Bnei Yisrael. What we see subsequently, though, is that when HaKadosh Baruch Hu speaks to Bilam, he doesn't speak to him with the term Elokim, but he speaks to him with the term Hashem, as if to say, you're not going to get me to respond b'midas hadin. You're not going to get me to view Bnei Yisrael b'midas hadin, but rather I'm going to view Bnei Yisrael through midas harachamim, through Shem Hashem. I mean, it's interesting that the Netziv wants to suggest that Bilam had this understanding of HaKadosh Baruch Hu as midas hadin and midas harachamim, right? The trait of strict justice, which is reflected in the name Elokim, and the trait of mercy, which is reflected in the name of Hashem. And Bilam wants to invoke Elokim, but in effect, says the Netziv, the only response that he gets is the response of Hashem. But perhaps we can use this to understand another question, and that is, what kind of conversation is this between Bilam and Balak? Bilam says to Balak, listen, the only thing I can say is that which Elokim puts in my mouth. Who is this Elokim? Did Balak understand who Elokim was? Okay, we can say that Bilam had a relationship with God. However, we understand that relationship with God. God spoke to Bilam. Yes, he spoke to him not like a regular Navi. He spoke to Bilam, though nevertheless there was a relationship. Bilam can say, okay, I understand what Elokim is, but Balak? How could Balak understand what Elokim is? So perhaps we can explain this by saying that even among the Umos HaOlam, even among the nations of the world, there was a belief that there were powers in the world that afflicted humanity, powers in the world that punished humanity. And as a result of those powers in the world punishing humanity, terrible things happened. So perhaps Balak had a concept of Elokim. Balak had a concept of Midas Hadin. Balak had a concept of being judged strictly. And that was, after all, the way in which the world was created. Bereshis bara Elokim. It's the natural world that's a reflection of God's midah, his attribute of Elokim. Bnei Yisrael, on the other hand, we have a unique relationship with Kadosh Baruch Hu. Yes, there are times when we are indeed subject to his midas hadin, to his Elokim component, but more often than not, we call out to Hashem with his midas harachamim. We say in the Yud Gimel Midos, the 13 attributes of mercy, we say Hashem, Hashem. Right? We refer to him as Hashem because we want to invoke God's rachamim, we want to invoke God's mercy. So it is quite possible that Balak had a concept that there is a divinity in the world that operates b'midas hadin. And perhaps that's what Bilam was referring to. So Balak didn't say, by the way, who is this God? You know, what did he do? Where does he live? What does he look like? Balak didn't have those questions. Balak simply said, okay, I understand that there is this component, there is this attribute in the world, and that's what Bilam is referring to. The Malbim says that this is part of the conversation between Bilam and Balak, that Bilam is essentially saying to Balak, listen, it's not that I didn't come to you earlier because you didn't give me enough kavod or because I didn't have kavod for you as the melech. I didn't come to you earlier because Eini Birishusi, says the Malbim. I couldn't control myself. Eini Birishusi. I'm not in my own rishus. I don't have the ability to control that which I do. And even now, Hinei Basi, now that I have come, I want you also to know that I'm not in my own rishus, that I still can't control myself. And not only am I maybe not going to be able to curse them, but I might even have to bless them. That's the Hinei Basi, says the Malbim, that Bilam is giving to Balak. So all in all, not a very good message that Bilam is giving to Balak. Here, Balak wants this sorcerer, this Kosem, to come and to curse Bnei Yisrael, and all he's hearing over and over and over again is, I can't do it, right? I can only do that which God is going to put into my mouth. He's not saying that he's not going to be able to curse them. He doesn't know. It's very much a suffix, very much up in the air. He's saying, I can only do that which God is going to put in my mouth. So we could sort of imagine to ourselves that Balak is not at all happy here with what's going on, that Balak is distressed, that this is the way in which Bilam is Balak is distressed that this is the way in which Bilam is connecting to him, that this is what Bilam is saying to him. The next pasuk, pasuk Lametes 39, sort of gives us a little bit of a hint as to how Balak is taking this news from Bilam. The pasuk says, "Vayelech Bilam im Balak, vayavau Kiryas Chutzos." That Bilam goes im Balak, and they come to Kiryas Chutzos. The Or HaChaim mentions here that we can see from this pasuk something unusual. It says Vayelech Bilam im Balak. It doesn't say Vayelchu Shnehem Yachdav, that the two of them went together, or Vayelchu Bilam u Balak. No, Vayelech Bilam im Balak. Bilam went with Balak. Says the Or HaChaim, this is a sign that Balak is not at all happy with what Bilam is telling him. And says the Or HaChaim, Sheniskaven Lomar Shalom Nahag Bo Kavod. Right, that at this point, Balak was not showing any kavod to Bilam. And what happened? V'halach Balak v'hu halach acharav. Balak left. Balak turned around and walked away, showed him his back. And now Bilam is running after Balak. And that's why it doesn't say, says the Or HaChaim, Vayelchu Balak u Bilam. So as a result of what Balak is hearing, that Bilam is not going to be able to do perhaps what Balak wants, Balak in frustration turns around and walks away. So obviously Bilam runs after him, Bilam follows him, and where do they go? They go, Vayelech Bilam im Balak, Vayavou Kiryas Chutzos. They come to a place called Kiryas Chutzos. What is Kiryas Chutzos? So says Rashi, it was a place, it was Ir Mileah Shvakim Anashim Vinashim Vitaf Bechutzoseha. It was a city that was filled with oxen and with people and with women and with children all in the streets. He's taking him to New York City, taking him to a place where he can see everything which is going on. Lomar, as if to say, says Rashi, Re'ei v'rachem shelo ya'akru kol eila. As if to say, listen, look, have rachamim, have mercy that all of this shouldn't disappear, that all of these people shouldn't be killed, that this metropolis shouldn't be destroyed. The Medrash Agada actually offers another little piece to this, an interesting twist on this. And the Medrash Agada says, Amar lo Bilam la Balak. Bilam says to Balak, Kol eile ba'asa le'abeid shelo asu ra'a miyamehem. Look at all of these children. They've never done anything wrong in their lives, and this Jewish people is now coming to destroy them. And as if to say, you know, we're a bunch of tzaddikim, we're a bunch of righteous people. We've never done anything wrong, and the evil Jews are now coming to wipe us out. Rav Shimshon Raphael Hirsch also understands in a similar way to Rashi that the word chutzos is a word for shvakim. It's a word for lots of different shuks, if you will. Think of the shuk in Israel. Think of Machane Yehuda, right? Lots of different streets, intersection, people, stores, civilization, population. This is where Balak is taking Bilam. As if to say, what a shame it would be for all of this to be destroyed. But Rav Shimshon Raphael Hirsch gives us another interpretation as well, that he's taking him to a place called Chutzos. The word Chutzah is used in different places in Tanakh in different connotations. One connotation, says Rav Hirsch, is roads, that these Chutzos are roads. So roads in what sense? As if to say that the place where he went to was a fortified city. It was sort of like a center city, and all roads led into that city. Meaning, again, perhaps the same idea that even if he didn't take him to Machane Yehuda, he took him to this city where you could see all the roads coming into the city. You could see the centrality of the city, the importance of the city. That's where Balak takes Bilam. The Netziv points out that what's happening here is Vayelech, he went, that remember that when Bilam first showed up, Balak and Bilam went to the border. Remember that we looked at that map last week. where they went to the northern border of Moab, and Bnei Yisrael were encamped against the northern border of Moab. And that's where Balak took Bilam to see what he was up against. Now, Vayelech, says the Netziv, that they go Meir Shebiktsei Hagvul. They go from the border town, wherever they were in this border town, and they come to this Kiryas Chutzos, which is the metropolis of Moab, which is this place where Balak had his, which is this place where Balak lived in a royal fashion. Says the Netziv, Ir HaMelucha Uchvodo. This was a city that was the Ir Melucha, was the seat of government, and it was designed to honor Balak. So they go from the border, they go to the heart of the city. I don't know, I guess they go from the Little Neck, Nassau County border, and then they drive into Manhattan so that Bilam can see and appreciate and understand everything that's there. In Pasuk Mem, in Pasuk Mem, verse 40, we find, what does Balak do? Vayizbach Balak bakar vatzon, that Balak slaughters a bakar, an ox, vitzon, and a sheep. Vayishalach leVilam velasarim asherito, and he sends it to Bilam and to the officers that were with him. Interesting that there are those who want to interpret this pasuk to say this was a sign of respect that Balak was giving Bilam. Perhaps after he just dissed him by turning his back on him and walking away, and now that he's showed him the metropolis and everything that's at stake, so now he's trying to once again curry favor with Bilam, and he can do that by showing Bilam respect. So how does he do that? Well, in addition to feeding Bilam, because after all, it makes a lot of sense. You have guests, you have to feed your guests. So obviously, Balak fed Bilam and the Sarim and everybody else who was there. But in addition to that, Vayizbach Balak bakar vatzod, he slaughtered a lot of meat, and he sent this to Bilam and to the officers that were with him. So that's, of course, the simple interpretation. But we see a fascinating approach which is developed here by Rashi. Rashi relying on a Gemara, which we'll talk about in a minute. But what does Rashi say? Rashi says, Bakar Vatzon, says Rashi, Davar Mu'at, just a little bit. Rashi says, Davar Mu'at, just a little bit, as if to say, you know what? It says, Vayizbach Balak Bakar, one ox, one cow, one ox, Vatzon, and one sheep. Where does Rashi get this from? So the Mizrahi seems to say that why is the Torah... Where does Rashi get this from? So the Mizrahi is telling us that obviously the Torah is trying to tell us something more than the fact that Balak would send food to his guests. Because obviously that should be understood intuitively, and there's no reason for the Torah to tell us this. But from the fact that the Torah does tell us, the Torah wants to tell us something unique about this food that Balak is sending to Bilam and to the Sarim. And therefore the Mizrahi makes reference to the Medrash Rabbah that wants to say that this pasuk is coming to teach us Rish Oso Shel Balak, just how evil Balak was. We've seen how evil Bilam was, and now we're going to see how evil Balak was. Why? Because Balak only slaughtered one ox and one sheep and sent that to Bilam. A small amount of meat for Bilam and for everyone who traveled with him. And the Mizrahi here makes reference to a very well-known Gemara. It's a Gemara that we've seen before, and it's a Gemara that appears in Maseches Bava Metzia. And there the Gemara says, referring back to Avram Avinu after his bris milah, sitting at his tent, and now seeing the people, obviously the Malachim, who were sent by HaKadosh Baruch Hu. They're passing by the tent. So we know that Avram Avinu runs to greet them, and he encourages them to come and to allow him to perform the mitzvah of Hachnasas Orchim. And the Torah uses the phrase Vayivtzar bam ma'od, that he pressed them greatly, pressed them very much. Says the Gemara, Amar Rebbe Elazar. Rebbe Elazar says, Mikan shemisarvin lakatan ve'en misarvin lagadol. From this we learn that you are supposed to initially refuse if someone of not great stature asks you to do something. However, if a person of great stature asks you, you're supposed to accede right away. It's interesting, brought down lahalacha, that if you're asked to daven for the Amud, right, you're asked to lead the davening. So initially you should say, no, thank you, it's okay, I don't need to, blah, blah, blah. You should demonstrate a certain refusal. It shouldn't be a lie, right? It should be, am I really Rawi? Am I really capable? Am I really worthy of going up and leading these people? And then the Gabbai is supposed to ask you a second time, and then finally the third time you're supposed to say, okay, so I'll go. However, if a person of great stature asks you, so then you should respond right away and go. In other words, essentially you're saying, if this person of great stature thinks that I'm able to do this, okay, call it kavod, I'm going and I'm going to do it. And therefore run to do it. So here, Avraham Avinu, who was a person of great stature, pressed the malachim, and they acceded to come and to allow him to perform hachnasas orchim. The Torah then says, "Va'ekcha fas lechem," right? That what did Avraham Avinu say to these malachim? He said, "Listen, I'm going to get a little bit of bread. I'll get you a couple slices of bread. I'll get you some bread and I don't know, maybe a little bit of cream cheese." But what happened? So we know the pasuk says, "Ve'ela bakar ratz Avraham." Avraham ran. He got a cow and he cooked meat for them and he made them a real suda, made them a real feast. First he served them the milchiks, then he served them the fleishiks. He told them, "I'm going to get a little bit of bread for you," and then he went and did this whole big thing. So says the Gemara, Mikan. From here we learn shet tzadikim omri ma'at, that it's the character trait of tzaddikim, of righteous people, to say a little bit, va'osim harbe, and to do a lot. In other words, they don't promise the world. They do, they say that they're going to do a little bit, and then often they deliver in a much grander fashion than what they say they're going to do. On the other hand, says the Gemara, we see by Rishaim just the opposite. Rishaim omrim harbe, Rishaim say a lot, but va'afilu ma'at einam osim, but they don't even do a little bit of what they say. Asks the Gemara, Minalan, from where do we know this? What's our source for this? And the Gemara quotes, of course, the exchange between Avraham and Ephron. When it comes time to bury Sarah, so Avraham is bargaining with Ephron for Ma'arasa Machpelah, for this cave and this burial ground. And Ephron says, no big deal, you can have it, what's 400 shekel? And at the end, right, the bottom line, what happens is Ephron makes Avraham pay him not only 400 shekel, but 400 shekel in a currency that would be recognized anywhere. Probably, he didn't give him $400, he gave him 400 silver dollars. And not just silver dollars, but let's say real content silver dollars, like you would use for a pidyon haben. And, that was way more money than the $400. So Ephron, said he was going to do a lot, and in the end, he barely did anything to accommodate Abraham. In fact, made it even more difficult for Abraham. And says the Gur Aryeh, that's precisely what's happening here. All right, Balak said to Bilam, "Listen, I'm going to honor you. I'm going to give you everything. Right? You'll have a lot. You'll have everything good. It will be whatever I have. I will honor you. You'll have a house full of honor, a house full of treasures, a house full of honor." And what happened? Right? So like the Rishaim, he said a lot. He said he was going to do a lot. And in the end, what did he do? And in the end, he did hardly anything. He sent him one sheep. He sent him, one cow, which clearly was not a lot of food for all of those people. Bilam did just a little bit. He said a lot, like the Rishaim, who say a lot, but in the end, va'afilu ma'at lo asa. He only did a little bit. He only sent this amount, the small amount of meat for Bilam. The Or HaChaim points out something interesting, that we see here again the nature of this relationship between Balak and Bilam. They didn't sit down to eat together, right? They didn't go out to the same restaurant and sit and eat. Balak didn't invite Bilam to come into the royal dining room and to have food with him. But what happened? Balak sent him takeout. And now, we shouldn't disparage takeout, especially these days. It's important to support the restaurants. But it wasn't like Balak said, okay, come with me, you'll sit, you'll eat, we'll have a state dinner, everything will be nice and fine. No, Balak sent some sandwiches over to Bilam. Again, an indication of the nature of this relationship. And perhaps, says the Or HaChaim, that Balak was sending another message, because the pasuk said he sent the food to Bilam v'lesarim asher ito, and to the officers who were with him. The Or HaChaim wants to suggest, what does that mean? Why does he have to say to the officers that were with him? Because Balak was worried that Bilam would take everything for himself. So what happened? So he sent one package that was marked Bilam, and he sent another package that was marked for the Sarim Asher Ito, for the for the other people who were with him, as if to say specifically, listen, Bilam, you don't get everything. I'm sending this for you, but I'm also sending food for them, and don't touch their food. And then the Or HaChaim offers yet another insight into this, and what he says is this was a way for Balak to sort of ensure that Bilam's kavod wasn't. This was a way for Balak to be able to assure that Bilam didn't have an opportunity to act in a very coveted way in Moab. Why? Because one would imagine, let's say, Bilam is there and he wants to invite people and he wants people to come see him. After all, a famous sorcerer has come and he wants people to come see him. What happens? So Balak sends him just enough food for himself and the officers that were with him. In other words, he doesn't send him extra. He doesn't send him enough food to have a feast where Bilam can now convene this feast in his honor and have people come from all over. No, he's just got a few sandwiches, right? There's not enough for anybody else to come. As if Balak is ensuring that Bilam is not going to be able to act in any way which will bring a kavod to himself. The Medrash here suggests that Bilam's response to this slight by Balak was intense. He became very angry. And the Medrash says that Bilam thought to himself, wait a second, this guy Balak has plenty of food. He's got lots of cattle, he's got lots of sheep. And what does he send me? He sends me one cow and one sheep. He sends me a couple of sandwiches. And Bilam, as we know, who was very arrogant and very haughty and thought he deserved a lot of kavod, so Bilam was taken aback by this and became angry. The result of his anger is something intriguing. The Medrash suggests that Bilam vows that he's going to get even with Balak. Meaning, right, Balak only sent him a couple of sandwiches, but tomorrow when we go out, I'm going to have him build an altar and I'm going to have him bring 7 cows and 7 sheep. I'm gonna make him take a hit from the property. He wasn't willing to share what he had with me, so I'm gonna take it from him nevertheless, and I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna do that tomorrow when I go and have him build these mizbechot. So what we see is this fascinating idea that there is this tension back and forth between Bilam and Balak. Right? Balak doesn't give kavod to Bilam. Bilam says, okay, I'm going to get even. All of this intrigue that lies beneath the surface in the relationship between these two. Okay, a little bit of a shorter shiur for today. I hope that you all have a good day, a healthy day, a safe day. And Emir Hashem, we're not going to meet next week, obviously Pesach, or the week after, but hopefully Emir Hashem will see you in 2 weeks, actually 3 weeks. And hopefully Emir Hashem will be back in shul by that time. Everyone, stay well. Have a great day. Bye-bye.